Moving our new cog over to Cantabria, mothballing that cog, grouping everyone together in group, and then add it to the main mothballed fleet. 5 months. So once this hits in, say, 94, then I will stop drilling my armies. Scotland, tell us of the Peasants War. The peasantry has for some time demanded economic, religious and political amendments. Their dissatisfaction has grown to such an extent that violent revolts are becoming common day practice. Even though there is no central leadership and they lack proper armament, the peasants have still managed to pose a challenge to the authorita. Several important buildings, both religious and other, have been burnt and plundered as a protest. So Scotland is now going to have big problems with rebel uprisings. Poor Scotland, they can't catch a break. And they probably have no armies, because England probably killed them all. There will be blood. Rumour is spreading that Muscovy is preparing to attack Tver. We know this because Muscovy is malevolent. Now we've built up enough of a spy network with Granada where we could claim something. And I would really like to get Jabal Tarik. Gibraltar is clearly Spanish. So we're going to fabricate a claim. Jabal Tarik. Okay. So now we have a legitimate cause for war against Granada, which means that tomorrow... You have to wait a day for that to take effect. We will not suffer the -2 stability penalty for a no CB war. However, Granada is still allied to the Ottomans in Tunis. I mean, the other thing we can do is wait until the Ottomans get into a big war. Byzantium, Athens and Serbia... Sorry, that's not a big war. Need to wait until the Ottomans fight against Austria and Hungary, for example, or maybe the Mamelukes. And then once the once the Ottomans are distracted with somebody else, then we can go after Granada. Because of that big alliance, it's very likely that none of the others that have claims on Granada will go after them either. Since the 14th century, the wealthy and the powerful in the Italian city-states have been patronising artists and scholars wishing to explore the old Roman and Greek societies of their forefathers. As a cultural movement, the Renaissance already encompasses most of the region and has had a profound impact on literature, art, philosophy, and music. Humanist scholars are also analysing the society in which they live, comparing it to the ideals of classical philosophers. At the turn of 1450, Renaissance humanism has grown into a more mature movement, ready to permeate all aspects of society. A new ideal for rulers as well as those ruled is spreading as quickly as the early printers can distribute copies of these new ideas. A true Renaissance humanist is an expert in everything from politics, philosophy to art, textual analysis, music and architecture. The Renaissance is now ready to reshape the world to better fit its classical ideals. So this is the first of the institutions. This is how technology spreads. So if we click on the technology and then click on the show institutions button, which is the book, we can see these green hashed areas. These are areas where the institution is spreading to, and if we hover over them, we can see what institutions are actually there. So we can see that feudalism is already in all of these places, and actually if we click on feudalism, we can see precisely what is feudal. I can tell you now there's a few places in West Africa and most of the New World that don't have it, but most of the rest do, with actually the exception of Kazan and the Great Horde. So this is going to be a good example. So Kazan and the Great Horde do not have feudalism. They are greyed out. However, if we hover over the hashed lines, we can see that they are gaining it. So Tambov right now has got 28.7% feudalism. So if we click on the book down here on the province, so we've clicked on the province, we're clicking on the book, this will give us an overview of all of the institutions which are present. And then we can see that feudalism is currently gaining 0.4 per month. We hover over that number and we can see why. It's because nearby friendly province has feudalism, they gain plus 0.45, and the Great Horde have a spread modifier of plus 10% from something. So because Ryazan and because Kasimov, any of these provinces have feudalism already, it's going to be spreading to the adjacent. So the main way for it to spread is through adjacency. It will start in one place and then spread out from that one spot. However, as we saw with the Renaissance, it's already spreading in a lot of different places, which are clearly not next to the place where it spawned, which is Lucca. And we can see the spawning point by the icon. So feudalism, I think, actually spawned somewhere in like China. Not actually sure where feudalism spawns. But the Renaissance has spawned here in Lucca. So Lucca is solid green to say it's got it. And the place it spawns always gets it automatically. And this means that all of the adjacent provinces are going to get it pretty quickly because of the adjacency bonus. Note, friendly adjacent province. That means that you have to have positive relations with that nation to get the adjacency bonus. Friendly adjacent also means across water, so if you have a shared sea zone border, so for example Corsica and Sassa do, they will also be getting the friendly adjacency. Now if we click on, say, Paris will be a pretty good example. We can see that Paris is gaining it, even though they are clearly not adjacent to Lucca. And again, we can hover over the modifier to see why. They are European with 10 development, so they gain plus 0.9. They're also a European with 20 development, so they gain another 0.09, and these are all cumulative. They all add together. Nearby friendly province would gain them even more. They don't have one. Adjacent province has Renaissance, so it doesn't need to be friendly. Doesn't have one. And it's a European 5 development province after 1500. So basically anyone that doesn't have the Renaissance by 1500 in Europe will start to get it slowly. However, it's not 1500, so that does not occur either. Then they have a 20% spread bonus for whatever reason. So Paris is gaining it. Now, are any of our provinces getting it? Yeah, quite a few actually. Probably for the same reason. So if we click on Toledo, which is our capital, we can see that it is a European 10 development province, so it is therefore gaining plus 0.05. There are other ways of getting institutions, and I feel I should talk about it even though it's one of my hated mechanics in the game, and I do regularly mod this out, and you'll almost never see me doing this because I can't stand it. But every time you increase development in a province, it will gain some institution. Not a huge amount, but it will add up. So it can be a good idea if you have terrain with grasslands, or even better, farmlands, which has development cost reduction or just neutral dev cost. You can make it cheaper, you can spam development, and you can get institutions that way. It's a mechanic I absolutely detest. I don't use it, I hate it. I much prefer to use the actual, spread mechanics which already exist. I don't know why deving up does this too, but it does. And it can be a way of spreading institutions in areas like outside of Europe. But as I said, don't like it, hate the concept, don't use it. Different institutions will have different requirements, so those are just the requirements for Renaissance. World trade, for example, was spread to any province with a centre of trade. The higher the level of the centre of trade, the more institutions they will get, which is why countries like India will tend to get global trade pretty quickly because they have a lot of centres of trade. Tell us how you really feel. Oh wait, you made a mod to turn it off, so we know. Yep, I have actually made a mod which turns off that development, because I can't stand it. I like development, don't get me wrong, like some people misunderstand that. I love development, I love the fact you can build up provinces. I hate the fact that just randomly building up a random province in the middle of nowhere, which just happens to have very little development in the first place, the cost is low, suddenly magically makes the Renaissance appear. Why? No! Huh, I need a drink. Just drinking water because I was super thirsty, but now I'm just going to switch to tea. Still wish they would make institutions for outside of Europe. I mean, there are. It's only really the first 2 which are in Europe. So colonialism can spawn anywhere. You just need Quest for the New World. Or you need a colony, sorry. You need a colonial nation for colonialism to spawn outside of Europe, or to get it outside of Europe. Or printing press, which is really only in Protestant Europe, and Renaissance, which is only in Italy. So printing press and Renaissance are the problematic ones. Every single other institution will spread naturally outside of Europe. It just means that Europe gets that little early boost, but beyond 1550, 1600, the rest of the world can get everything pretty easily. But I agree. I do think that printing press should also have a chance of appearing in China. I think that Ming should have a random province that should spawn it. Maybe not as the center of the printing press, but they had paper, they had printing. So, I mean, that should be something which is doable through an event. Just say, this province gets 100% printing press. Boom, done. Job finished. Is Chinese culture? Yes. Is year something? Maybe 10 years after the printing press in Europe, if you want to keep that little bonus, and then have it spawn in China. Job's done. And in fact, the mod that I made has it so that different ideas can provide it. So if you have innovative print culture, if you have this idea with the mod that I have, then you will actually get printing press. I mean, it will spread to any nation's capital that has print culture. Likewise with colonialism, it will spread to anyone that has Quest for the New World. The first idea of exploration. Again, capital. You should mod that. That's beyond my skills. I don't know how to do events. I don't really want to dig into it that deeply. Changing it so I can change where institutions spread easily enough. That's not a difficult fix, and I should actually update the mod, that's true. Because I want to use it in the future, and I do like those tweaks. You know what, moderators? Ping me and remind me to do that, because that is a change I do need to make. I don't necessarily want to use it in this, because it will change... This is vanilla, and I need this to be vanilla, but in future games that I do, I might well use that mod. Because, like I said, I hate that system. Oh, I got so distracted I forgot to stop drilling. Alright, Castellon Civil War. My king, our people are losing confidence in your government, leading to a stability drop. Some superstitious fools even suggest our country is losing its divine favour. Tax income, global trade power and spy defence will decrease, while our national, local and global unrest will increase. So we did just drop stability by 2 points. And this is going to let us see what having a negative stability does. It is not good. You should not have negative stability if you can at all avoid it. So global trade power is reduced by 2%, foreign spy detection reduced by 10%. We have +4 national unrest. With the +7 from this Civil War event, interest is increased by 2, legitimacy is decreased by 2 a year, and then caravan power is also reduced by 10%, so you make less money. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to stability and expansion. I'm just going to boost this. Part of the reason I have not been spending admin power is that I could boost my stability as soon as the event starts. So that's going to already mitigate some of the effects. Castellon Civil War. During the past century, the Castellan nobility have, time and time again, actively tried to interfere with the succession of the Castellan crown and not flinched from allying outside powers. A new such battle seems to be brewing, and the succession is again in question. The legitimacy of the current heir is being questioned by some leading nobles who would prefer a relative of the king, aligned with the Aragonese crown. Meanwhile, the supporters of Enrique are making overtures to the Portuguese crown in order to secure the position of their candidate. Things have now spiralled into an open conflict, and it seems increasingly likely the faction without royal support will attempt to put their candidate directly on the throne rather than a queue for it. Some parts of the nobility remain undecided, and some have chosen to make use of this opportunity to protest against perceived infringement of their rights in general. Lose 2 stability, which is what we already dealt with. So we can either support Enrique, which will bring us closer in alignment to Portugal. We will lose 20 legitimacy, so it will drop to 77. 7 pretenders will ride in Burgos, Salamanca and Cadiz. And then Aragon and Castile also get this event. Or we can support the Aragonese candidate, which will bring us closer to Aragon. A noble of the Trastamara family with a strong claim becomes heir. So that is a 5-4-3. That's actually a really good heir. That's a 9, 10, 11, 12 points, whereas our current one's a 10. And then we'll get 7 rebels in Burgos, Salamanca and Cadiz. So Cadiz, Burgos, and then Salamanca is there. So it's not where our armies are. That's what I was checking. I think I'm going to support the Aragonese candidate. So we have a new heir to the throne, which I'm going to name. Could have renamed Enrique, actually. I keep forgetting that heirs are renameable. So this is going to be Farrell. Again, named after patrons. And then we have various uprisings. They did take a fort. Unfortunately, just part of this event. And then we have Salamanca and Cadiz. Now I'm immediately going to not move my troops because I want them to recover morale. I'm going to slow the game down a little bit, speed 3, and we'll just continue. They'll almost certainly start marching out. So here's one thing to know. When you have rebels, if you have a fort with full maintenance, any province taken adjacent to that fort will not suffer any penalties. So ordinarily, if a province falls to rebels, it will suffer a penalty of some kind. I'm not sure that's true for pretenders, but it is definitely true for separatists and religious rebels. So say Leon fell to separatists. Leon would then get a massive unrest penalty because they're starting to feel separatism movement. There's basically more rebels starting to appear in that area. However, if it was in Plancea and we still owned the Burgos fort, it would suffer no penalty. So it is a good idea to kind of checkerboard your nation with forts to make sure that every province is at least covered by a fort. So Toledo, being a fort province, covers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different provinces. It's a really good place to put a fort. So that's good to know. So that would be covered. Burgos would be covering all of these, which would mean that these Galician provinces are uncovered, and then these southern provinces are uncovered. So we probably want to consider building forts down there in the future, but that's not important right now. So we're going to spend a month or two recovering our morale. I keep wanting to call it organization, but it is not. And you do actually recover morale if you're on the move. We could absolutely be moving around. The reason I'm not doing that is because I don't want to get closer in case they decide to attack us. Portuguese involvement. Alfonso V has declared his support for the pro-Portuguese faction of the faction, has sent military aid across the border. We gain military power, and Leon also rises up. Now this one hasn't actually fallen, so these 3 provinces which spawned the uprising automatically fell to the rebels. This one hasn't, and I'm going to go and attack it. Leon is mountains. This is not a good place to attack. Mountains have a dice roll for attacker, -2. We'll explain exactly how combat works in a moment. And then also combat with reduction, which it doesn't say here. But it does. And then defensiveness. So if there was a fort in Leon, it would be a lot more difficult to take. Aragonese involvement. Juan II has decided to support the pro-Aragonese faction in our country and has sent military aid over the border. So we gain 2,000 manpower and military power. Excellent. Brothers from across the sea. Sometimes we are reminded of how far this world extends beyond our own realms. We've been visited by a strange group of people from lands far south of here. While most of them speak only their own peculiar sounding language, a few of them have conversed with our translators in Arabic. They claim to come from the great tribal kingdom of Alodia, and they seek friends among their fellow Christians. We have very little knowledge of Christians to the south, but these Alodia men seem genuine believers. They speak of Christ with a fervour in their voice and seem well versed in the scripture than our most average noble. Apparently their country is surrounded by religious enemies, and they ask us to send them aid in defending the true faith. While this conflict is too distant and unknown for us to get engaged directly, we could send some of our knowledge and resources with them. Of course we'll help you, brothers. Anything for one true God. The Bayesian diplomats are sent home with some resources to aid them in the defence of Christianity. We lose 11 ducats, or they return empty-handed. No, we'll absolutely support you. We are good Catholics. Okay, battle. So this is how battles look. If you click on the battle itself, or just make sure you have the army selected that's fighting, you will get this overview. So what does this mean? Well, there is a lot of randomization to battles, and that's what this die roll is. So every round, be it shock or fire, the dice is rolled. So we got an 8, they got a 2, which means that we have an advantage of 6 over them. However, this dice roll is then further modified by other events. We're fighting in the mountains, they are the defender, so we get the attacker penalty in mountains, which is a -2. So our dice roll is now a 6 to 2, meaning that we have won by basically 4 points. That is then further modified by the combat skill of your troops, and if you hover over an individual regiment, and you can see them fighting here, it will give you additional information. So because we've been drilling, we gain a land fire shock damage bonus, and then also a received damage bonus. So we take less damage and we do more damage. Then if we hover over theirs, we can see that they don't get any such modifiers. Then there's the pips, and the pips are actually a little bit easier to be seen in the military. So if we click on Latin Medieval Infantry, which is what our troops are, we can see that we have no pips in fire, no pips in shock. These are super early units. And then 1 in morale shock, which means that we do a little bit of extra morale damage to them. And then 1 morale defense, which means that we take a little bit less morale damage. So the Latin Medieval Infantry are pretty good in armies with morale problems. We probably could have done with switching to halberd infantry, because we are Castile, we start with a massive amount of morale thanks to our national ideas, and this would mean we would do a little bit of extra damage in the shock phase, so maybe that's something to investigate after this war. So we're going to be doing a bit of extra damage. We're going to be taking a little bit less damage. They do have higher morale than we do. They have a 3.2 morale, whereas we have a 2.8 base. However, you can see that our limit right now is much lower because we did not wait to regain all of our morale before fighting this battle. I basically wanted to attack Leon to try and secure this territory and stop it falling to enemies and stop it having penalties. So this was a risk. However, we do outnumber them 3 to 1. We have 19,000 men. They have 7. So, well, 2 and a bit to 1. Hopefully we will win. There are a couple of other modifiers at play. One of them is Discipline. Discipline is basically just a blanket increase to the damage you do and a blanket decrease to the damage you take. Morale, we've explained. The first army who runs out of morale runs away and loses. So you can win battles even if you're taking vastly more casualties by simply having more morale than they do and staying in the fight. Then the last one is military tactics. This is kind of similar to discipline, in which this is, well, actually discipline modifies your tactics. But tactics is the thing which determines if you do more damage and you take less damage. And the difference in tactics between the two can be a really important factor. And yeah, sorry, I'd forgotten about the fact that discipline just modifies tactics nowadays, so it's a bit easier to explain. So the country with the most tactics will do the more damage. The country that runs out of morale first loses. Those are the important notes. So every month, or every day rather, we'll see that these numbers tick up. These are the casualties being suffered. We had the better dice roll, so we are losing less men than they are, but they did get a dice roll. They did get some positives, so we are taking some casualties. We are now in the shock phase. So the shock phase has meant we've rolled again. So we've got a 6 minus 2, so we've got a 4. And they've got a 7. So this time they're winning, which means that they're going to be doing a bit more damage, except for the fact that we outnumber them. The other thing to know is we are getting flanking bonuses, because we have additional troops. So these grey squares, that's the absolute maximum number of troops that can be fighting in this area at once. This is where the reserves come in. So these 4 guys here on the back, these are currently considered reserves, and if they were off the screen completely... in fact, are they considered reserves? They might not be. If they're off the screen completely, they definitely are. But we're also flanking. So we have got cavalry who flank, and cavalry will automatically move in until they're in a flanking position and start attacking the opponent. How long has that been true? Because I remember Arumba did a big video about the fact that cavalry are useless because they didn't tuck in. They do now. Anyway, so cavalry do more flanking damage. They can also hit more enemies while flanking. So you can see this one guy is currently attacking these 2 units. Cavalry have a lot more shock pips, and they just generally do more shock damage. So we click on the Latin Knights. They have a shock pip. They also have morale, attack and defense. Furthermore, that is then further modified, just to make things more confusing, by your technology modifiers here. So we can see that Latin Knights have a +1 shock from this. So Latin Knights in this era are really powerful, which is why some players will front load their cavalry and then slowly reduce the amount of cavalry they have throughout the game.